Hello everyone. Today we'll discuss about the humerus bone. Now first of all, the side domination of the humerus bone. Now first of all, the upper end of the humerus bone is actually rounded and forms the head of the bone. Okay, while the lower end is basically expanded from side to side and is flattened from before backward. Okay, so head is rounded while the lower end is actually expanded from side to side. Okay, and remember, while you are holding the particular humerus bone, make sure that the head of the humerus bone is actually placed medially upward and backward, because only in this position only the humerus bone in your hand is actually placed. So remember, medially upward and backward. Okay, now over here, what about the front and the back side? So to know the front side, remember, the lesser tubercle basically projects from the front of the upper end and is limited laterally by the intertubercular sulcus or the bicipital groove. Okay, and also remember the medial epicondyle. Okay, in the front part of the particular this humerus bone, the medial epicondyle of the humerus bone is actually expanded more as compared to the lateral epicondyle. So as you can see over here, the medial epicondyle is actually more we can say expanded. Okay, so of course you can see that this particular bone in this figure is actually the right-handed humerus bone. How? Because the medial epicondyle over here is expanded and the head is rounded and the lower end is actually expanded, and the lesser tubercle is actually present in front. So this over here, this bone is the right hand humerus bone. Okay, and next are the important features of the humerus bone. First of all, the upper end of the humerus bone. Now basically the head is directed medially backward and upward, and it basically articulates along with the glenoid cavity of the scapula to form the shoulder joint. Okay, so remember, the head of the humerus bone and the glenoid cavity of the scapula together forms the shoulder joint. Also, the head actually forms about 1/3 of the whole sphere of the particular upper end of the humerus and is much larger than the glenoid cavity. Okay, so you might think that how this particular shoulder joint is formed, because the this head is basically large as compared to the glenoid cavity. So remember, there is one glenoid labrum present around the ends, or we can say the border of the glenoid cavity, which actually helps to fit tightly along with the head of the humerus bone, or we can say the sphere over here, the head of the humerus bone. Now next is the anatomical neck. Okay, now over here, as you can see the yellow colored line over here, this is the anatomical neck of the humerus bone. Now this line actually separates the head from the rest of the upper end of the humerus bone. Okay, now next is the lesser tubercle. Now the lesser tubercle is actually an elevation on the anterior aspect of the upper end, while the greater tubercle is actually an elevation that forms the lateral part of the upper end. So you can even determine the side of the particular humerus bone by getting the side of the greater tubercle, because this particular greater tubercle is actually present at the lateral part of the upper end of the humerus bone. Now its posterior aspect means this tubercle's posterior aspect is actually marked by 3 impressions, that is the upper, middle and the lower impression. Now the intertubercular sulcus. Now this sulcus, as you can see in the diagram, is actually also known as the bicipital groove and separates the lesser tubercle medially from the anterior part of the greater tubercle, and this sulcus has medial and the lateral lips that represent downwards prolongations of the lesser and the greater tubercles. Okay, now also we have one more neck of the, we can say, of the upper end of the humerus, that is a surgical neck. Now this surgical neck is actually a narrow line separating the upper end of the humerus from the rest of the shaft. So over here, remember, the anatomical neck separates the head from the rest of the upper part or upper end of the humerus, and surgical neck part of the humerus bone actually separates the upper end of the humerus from the rest of the shaft. Now we have one more neck, that is a morphological neck. Now this neck is actually lying 0.5 centimeter above the surgical neck, and this basically shows the position of the epiphyseal line. Okay, now next is about the lower end of the humerus bone. Now the lower end basically forms the condyles. Okay, we have medial epicondyle and the lateral epicondyle. We can see the condyles. Okay, we have over here condyles. So over here, this lower end basically forms the condyles, which is expanded from side to side and has articular and non-articular parts. Now first of all we talk about the articular parts. Now what are the articular parts? That actually will articulate with the radius and the ulnar bones, and the non-articular parts won't be articulating with any bones. Now first of all the articulating parts. Now these are two, that is the trochlea and the capitulum. First of all the capitulum over here, as you can see this is a capitulum. Now first of all the capitulum is actually rounded projection, okay, which articulates with the head of the radius. Now next is about the trochlea. Now trochlea is actually a pulley shaped surface, as you can see in the diagram. Now it basically articulates with the trochlear notch of the ulna. Okay, capitulum articulates with the radius, so laterally, and trochlea articulates with the ulna. That's why it is medially. Okay, you can remember by this thing. Now over here the medial edge of the trochlea projects downward 6 mm more than the lateral edge. Okay, as you can see over here, 6 mm downward. Okay, also this basically, because of this results in the formation of the carrying angle. Okay, now next is about the non-articular part of the lower end. Over here we have total 7 important structure. First of all the medial epicondyle. So as you can see the medial epicondyle is actually present, the prominent bony projection on the medial side of the lower end of the humerus, and it is subcutaneous and is easily felt on the medial side of the elbow. You can easily feel this, okay, in your elbow side, in the elbow joint. And next is the lateral epicondyle. Now as you can see this lateral epicondyle is actually smaller as compared to the medial epicondyle. Okay, and by this epicondyle you can determine the side of the particular humerus bone. Now the anterolateral part of the lateral epicondyle has a muscular impression also. Now next is the lateral supracondylar ridge. Now this particular ridge is actually sharp lateral margin just above the lower end, and this is known as the lateral supracondylar ridge. The next is the medial supracondylar ridge. Now this medial supracondylar ridge is actually a similar ridge like that of the lateral, but present on the medial side. Simple. And next is the coronoid fossa. Now this coronoid fossa is actually a depression just above the anterior aspect of the trochlea. Okay, anterior aspect of the trochlea, and it accommodates the coronoid process of the ulna when the elbow is flexed. And next is the radial fossa. Of course, now this fossa is actually depression present just above the anterior aspect of the capitulum, and it basically accommodates the head of the radius when the elbow is flexed. So remember, the coronoid fossa actually accommodates the coronoid process of the ulna when the elbow is flexed, and the radial fossa actually accommodates the head of the radius when the elbow is flexed. Now finally the olecranon fossa. Now this fossa basically lies just above the posterior aspect of the trochlea and accommodates the olecranon process of the ulna when the elbow is extended. Remember, extended. Okay. Now next is the shaft of the humerus bone. Okay, now first of all the shaft of the humerus bone is basically rounded in the upper half and is triangular in the lower half. Rounded in the upper part and triangular in the lower part. Okay, in the triangular part it is basically, of course, 3 borders and 3 surfaces. So first of all we talk about the borders. Now remember, it has basically 3 borders, that is the anterior border, lateral border, and the, of course, medial border. Anterior border, lateral, and the medial border. Now first of all the upper 1/3 of the anterior border forms the lateral lip of the intertubercular sulcus. Very important. Now in its medial part, okay, in the upper part there is intertubercular sulcus lateral lip, while in the middle part it forms the anterior margin of the deltoid tuberosity. Okay. Now the lower half of the anterior border is smooth and rounded. So remember, the upper part of the anterior border actually forms the lateral lip of the intertubercular sulcus or the bicipital groove. The medial part, or the middle part actually forms the anterior margin of the deltoid tuberosity, and the lower part or the lower half of this anterior border forms the actually smooth and rounded. Now the lateral border of this triangular area is actually prominent only at the lower end and actually forms the lateral supracondylar ridge. Okay. Now in the upper part it is barely traceable up to the posterior surface of the greater tubercle, Remember, in the middle part, it is interrupted by the radial or the spiral groove. So, remember, in the upper part of the lateral border, this particular lateral border is barely traceable. In the middle part, it is actually interrupted by the radial or the spiral groove. And in the lower end, in the lower part, the lateral border actually prominent and forms the lateral supracondylar ridge. Now next is the medial border. Now the upper part of the medial border actually forms the medial lip of the intertubercular sulcus. So remember, the anterior border of this triangular, or the upper part or the upper one third of the anterior border actually forms the lateral lip of the intertubercular sulcus, while the upper part of the medial border will actually form the medial lip of the intertubercular sulcus. Okay. Now about its middle, in the middle of the particular medial this medial border, it represents a rough strips and continues below with the medial supracondylar ridge. Simple. Okay. And next are the surfaces. Now basically three surfaces, that is the anterolateral surface, anteromedial surface, and the posterior surface, of course. Now first of all, the anterolateral surface of the triangular area in the shaft of the humerus bone. Now first of all, the anterolateral part is of course present in between the anterior and the lateral border, and the upper surface or the upper half of this particular surface, anterolateral surface, is covered by the deltoid muscle, and a little above the middle of this particular surface is actually marked by V-shaped deltoid tuberosity. Okay, V-shaped deltoid tuberosity. Now, behind the deltoid tuberosity, the radial groove runs downwards and forwards across this surface. Okay. Now, next is, so remember, in the anterolateral surface, in the middle part or in the almost the middle part, there is deltoid tuberosity, and behind deltoid tuberosity, there is a radial or the spiral groove. Now, next is the anteromedial surface, of course, present between the anterior and the medial borders, and its upper one third is narrow and forms the floor of the intertubercular sulcus or the bicipital groove. Okay, now a nutrient foramen is basically seen on this surface in its middle near the medial border. Now last is the posterior surface. Now this surface is actually lying between the medial and the lateral borders, and its upper part is actually marked by one oblique ridge, and the middle one third actually crossed by the radial groove. So remember, upper part marked by oblique ridge and middle one third is crossed by the radial groove. Okay. Now next are the attachments over here of the humerus bone. Okay. Now first of all, the multipinnate subscapularis is actually basically inserted into the lesser tubercle. In the lesser tubercle, there is insertion of the subscapularis multipinnate muscle. Now next is the supraspinatus. Now the supraspinatus muscle is actually inserted into the uppermost impression on the greater tubercle. The infraspinatus is basically inserted into the middle impression on the greater tubercle, and the teres minor muscle is basically inserted into the lower impression on the greater tubercle. So remember, in the I told you before only that the basically the greater tubercle is actually having three impression at the posterior surface basically. Okay, and over there are three impressions. There is the upper, middle, and the lower. So the upper impression of the on the greater tubercle, there is supraspinatus, in the middle infraspinatus, and in the lower impression there is the teres minor muscle insertion. Okay, now next is the pectoralis major muscle. Now this muscle is basically inserted into the lateral lip of the intertubercular sulcus. Okay, and the insertion is basically bilaminar. Okay, now the latissimus dorsi is basically inserted onto the floor of the intertubercular sulcus or the bicipital groove, and the teres major is basically inserted into the medial lip of the bicipital groove. So remember, on the lateral lip there is pectoralis major muscle, into the floor there is latissimus dorsi, and into the medial lip of the bicipital groove there is teres major muscle. So remember the series: pectoralis major, latissimus dorsi, teres major from the lateral lip to the medial lip, okay, of the bicipital groove. Now next are the contents of the intertubercular sulcus. Very important question. Now over here, remember the contents of the sulcus or the bicipital groove are basically the tendon of the long head of the biceps brachii and the synovial sheath, and the ascending branch of the anterior circumflex humeral artery. Okay. And next is the insertion of the deltoid muscle into the deltoid tuberosity, as the name says. And next is the coracobrachialis. Now this muscle is basically inserted into the rough area on the middle of the medial border. The brachialis muscle basically arising or originating from the lower half of the anteromedial and the anterolateral surfaces of the shaft, and also a part of this from the part of the area extending onto the posterior aspect. The brachioradialis basically arises from the upper two-third of the lateral supracondylar ridge. The extensor carpi radialis longus, or we can say ECRL, basically arises from the lower one-third of the lateral supracondylar ridge. The pronator teres, or we can say the humeral head of the pronator teres, basically arises from the lower one-third of the medial supracondylar ridge. The superficial flexure muscles of the forearm basically arises by a common origin from the anterior aspect of the medial epicondyle, and this particular area is known as the common flexure origin. Why? Because over here the superficial flexure muscles basically originates from the medial epicondyles. Okay, and that's why this particular medial epicondyle is also known as the common flexure origin. While same way over here, the lateral epicondyle is basically known as the common extensor origin. Why? Because over here the superficial extension muscle of the forearm are basically having the common origin over here in the lateral epicondyle. So medial epicondyle also known as the common flexure origin, and the lateral epicondyle also known as the common extensor origin. Now anconeus muscle, now this muscle is basically arising from the posterior surface of the lateral epicondyle. The lateral head of the triceps brachii, if you know, the triceps brachii is basically three heads. There is a long head, lateral head and the medial head. So remember, the lateral head of the triceps brachii basically arises from the oblique ridge on the upper part of the posterior surface above the radial groove, while its medial head basically arises from the posterior surface below the radial groove. Okay. So remember, in short, lateral head of the triceps brachii, upper part of the posterior surface above the radial groove, while the medial head arises from the posterior surface below the radial groove. Okay. Now also remember, there is attachment of the capsular ligament of the shoulder joint and capsular ligament of the elbow joint over in the humerus bone also. Okay. Now remember, three nerves are basically directly related to the humerus bone and are therefore liable to injury. Okay, three nerves directly are related to the particular humerus bone, and these three nerves are the axillary nerve, radial nerve and the ulnar nerve. Okay, so over here remember, the axillary nerve is basically present at the surgical neck of the humerus, the radial nerve at the radial groove and the ulnar nerve behind the medial epicondyle. Okay, and because of this, if the fracture of this particular humerus bone occur at these areas, then there is maximum possibility that these three nerves may get injured. Okay, now next are the applied aspects of this particular humerus bone. Now common sites of the fracture of the humerus bones are the surgical neck, the shaft of the humerus and the supracondylar ridge. Okay, now if we talk about supracondylar fracture, okay, now over here the supracondylar fracture is actually common in the young age. Okay, and it is basically produced by the fall on the outstretched hand. Whenever you fall on an outstretched hand, this supracondylar fracture basically occurs. Now remember, the lower fragment of this particular fracture is mostly displaced backward, so that the elbow is unduly prominent, as you can see in this diagram, in this photo. And this basically, the same thing occurs when there is dislocation of the elbow joint. In the dislocation of the elbow joint, there is unduly prominence of the elbow joint. The same in the fracture of the supracondylar ridge or supracondylar fracture, there is unduly prominence of the elbow joint. Now this fracture may also cause injury to the median nerve. Okay, and it may also lead to Volkmann ischemic contracture, as you can see in this photo, that this hand is actually suffering from the Volkmann ischemic contracture. Now over here, this basic thing is actually caused by the occlusion of the brachial artery because of the fracture over here in this area. Now next very important thing is the equilateral triangle formed in your flexed elbow. Now remember, whenever your elbows are flexed, three main structures, that is the lateral epicondyle, medial epicondyle, these two epicondyle of the humerus bone, okay, and the olecranon process of the ulna, these three actually forms an equilateral triangle like structure. Okay, whenever your elbow joint is actually extended. Okay, now these three structures will actually come in a straight line, but when they're actually flexed, they will form an equilateral triangle. This is a very important question usually asked in the exam. Now remember, whenever your humerus bone is actually displaced, so remember the head of the humerus bone is commonly displaced or dislocates inferiorly because it has minimal or almost negligible support inferiorly. Okay, so this was all about the humerus bone. I hope you understood well. Thank you so much.